You were one of the first B-52s to be able to be engaged in combat in Vietnam.
We were the first.
So you complete your training with the F-4.
The fact that I'm still here talking to you alone makes it my favorite airplane.
216 combat missions? That seems like a big number.
It seemed like it to me. Some of our missions, we would fly 6 a day. Backseater yells, MiGs, MiGs. I said, where? 12 o'clock. We had 14 SAMs fired at us in 15 minutes. It went off so close that it rolled the airplanes. I'll never forget that SAM. We had a horrible record in Vietnam fighting MiGs. The Navy had a better record than we had. The Air Force today, they've changed things a lot.
Hi, I'm John Barry, President and CEO of Wings Over the Rockies Air and Space Museum. And in this episode of Behind the Wings podcast, we are excited to speak with Wings Over the Rockies volunteer Phil Mentesana. Now, Phil will share his personal stories about his time as an electronic warfare officer in the B-52, as a pilot flying the F-4 in Vietnam, and well, just join us to hear Phil's many great stories. Now, with all that out of the way, it's time to go behind the wings.
Before we get started, it's great to be here in Wings Over the Rockies Air and Space Museum, the former Lowry Air Force Base, where we've got Phil Mentesana with us. Phil, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Phil Mentesana is my name. I joined the Air Force way back before y'all were born in 1958. Program called Aviation Cadets. Went through that. I had a recruiter sell me a bill of goods, and he said, what do you want to be, a pilot or a navigator? And I said, well, I want to be a pilot. And I said, I passed all the tests for pilots, didn't I? And he says, yes, you did. He says, but tell you what, he says, it's going to be 6 months before I can get you in a pilot training class. He said, I can get you in a navigator class next month. I said, I don't know. And he said, well, you're in the same airplane. He says, you tell the pilots what to do. And I said, well, okay, well, go on and sign me up for that. Well, that mistake cost me 5 years to get back into pilot training. So that, and then I did 21 years in the Air Force, flew the B-52s in training. And that was actually the one out front, probably. After that, went T-38s in pilot training, stayed as an IP, flew F-4s after that. Totally after that, went to work for United Airlines and flew everything they own. I was qualified in the 727, 737, 747, 757, 767, 777, and DC-10.
That's an amazing career, Phil. So before we get into the specifics of flying, tell me what really excited you about flying and what stands out for you, when you tell people about your history.
I mean, I wanted to be a pilot, and I'm an EW sitting in the back of a B-52. That really wasn't what I was looking for. About 2 or 3 of the B-52 flights were very long, some of them 25 hours. We'd all take breaks. We still only had the 6 crew members, so we still only had 2 pilots. When the aircraft commander was taking the break, the co-pilot let me fly the B-52, take it off autopilot, and I'd fly it. And, for a few minutes. And he didn't let me do very much, but stayed real close to me. But by then I was hooked.
You're in the B-52, you're flying as an EWO, but now you're flying in combat. You're over in Vietnam getting ready for arc flight. Also, the fact that you were one of the first B-52s to be able to be engaged in combat in Vietnam. Tell us a story about that.
We were the first, actually.
Yeah.
While no mission goes without an order from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the 3rd Air Division immediately begins planning for the requested strike.
Joint Chiefs of Staff had recommended, after we had lost some people in Vietnam, or very early in the war, I think there were 25 Americans killed. And as a reaction to that, there was going to be something. There are only 2 F-model B-52 units, Carswell and Mather, and I was at Mather. Each of us had 15 B-52Fs, and the Fs were the only airplanes that could carry non-nuclear weapons. All the other B-52s, the bomb bays would not accommodate iron bombs. So we were going to go over to Andersen Air Force Base in Guam.
Andersen Air Force Base, Guam. Home station for the B-52s being launched almost daily in bombing attacks against Viet Cong targets in South Vietnam.
The target we were going to go over and bomb was Phu Quien Air Base, which is very close to Hanoi. We were going to take 30 B-52s in trail, 1 mile in trail, low level, fly over Hanoi, pop up, and bomb Phu Quien. And they had all kinds of missions planned after that, which would have devastated the North Vietnamese military. We didn't have that many problems going up there because they didn't have a lot of SAM missiles at that time. They had very few MiG airplanes, and it probably would have ended the war right then. However, this president was thinking about whether we should do it or not, and he was given a lot of airtime, in my humble opinion, to somebody that was standing next to him. His name was McNamara.
Upon arrival, Secretary McNamara is taken to the headquarters conference room for a briefing on the division's activities.
He was not in favor of a big strike at all. He wanted to escalate in tiny, tiny footsteps to get into Vietnam. So we got up that next morning and went out, and they said, hold it, there's been a delay. So they said, come back tomorrow morning for the briefing. So we came back the next morning. Well, that day we got out the airplanes and I actually started the engines. And they said, hold it, there's been a delay. And the next day we went out, didn't even get to start the engines. They said the mission's canceled. That cancellation meant we had 4 months now to spend in Guam at Taragi Beach. And we flew training missions around all the Mariana Islands and popping up on Saipan and all these different islands around there, and flew training missions. And then comes an event in Vietnam. They decided they were going to use B-52s for ArcLight. And the ArcLight mission was started in February of '65.
So how many months between when you got to Guam when you first actually flew?
4 months. When that one took off, the plan was, it was SAC again, and they had it planned to the second when you would take off, and everything planned to the second when you would hit the tanker. And that was really important, because we took off and we flew into a typhoon. So we had 30 airplanes flying 3-ship formations, so 10 cells 1 mile apart flying these formations, and we're going to hit our refueling tanker in this typhoon. And the lead aircraft, which was in the cell ahead of us, got there early. And he decided that he would do a 360-degree turn to kill some time so he would be on time at the tanker. Well, he did a 360-degree turn into all of us in trail behind him. We saw him coming. Our radar navigator was screaming, "What is he doing? What is he doing?" And he just missed us and went into the cell behind us.
When they turned back, how many aircraft were lost, and how many made it to the target?
2 airplanes were lost. 6 people in each airplane. About 4 or 5 survived. The rest of them all were fatal.
You've flown to Vietnam, you've got combat time as EWO, and now you get a chance to go to pilot training, all right? Why'd you pick the F4?
We all asked for F4s, and I got an F4 because they needed some rank in the squadrons over there. We were getting nothing but lieutenants and captains, and they usually had a LC for the squadron commander, and the next guy down the list was probably a captain.
So you complete your training with the F4, one right here behind you looking at you. You went back to Vietnam. You ended up flying 216 combat missions? That seems like a big number.
It seemed like it to me.
It did.
And it was.
Yeah, it was a lot. But some of you've got to put that in perspective. You really do. I had 216 combat missions. Probably 30 or 40% of those were in North Vietnam. That was in Route Pac 6. That was hot. We flew in Cambodia, we flew in Laos, and we flew in South Vietnam. As a matter of fact, the first 6 months that I was in Vietnam, I had dropped a bomb in every country in Southeast Asia save one. I had never been to South Vietnam.
100 missions usually was the time where you got sent back home.
Yeah.
So how did you get 216 out of it?
Well, I spent a year, and some of our missions, we would fly 6 a day. We had a Da Nang turn. We'd fly a mission, land at Da Nang, arm up again, fly a mission, fly back to Da Nang, arm up again, fly a mission, come back to Da Nang. After the last mission was back to Ubon again, and they were through for the day.
So I'm sitting in front of this F4, pretty impressive looking aircraft. What was that like to fly?
It was a lot of fun to fly. It's my favorite airplane. The fact that I'm still here talking to you alone makes it my favorite airplane. With bombs hanging all over and everything, you can go Mach 1 at a blink of an eye. That's not a problem. You can go faster than the speed of sound, but the airplane's capable of Mach 2.3. In training, you had one mission that you went up and got the absolute maximum speed you could get with the airplane. I went out to get in the airplane, and it was freshly painted new airplane. It just looked like it came right out of the factory, but it was an old airplane. And you flew this special profile, and you flew the profile where you climbed and descended and climbed and descended, and in the last descent, the airplane was going the maximum speed it would go. And I was up to 1,100 and some odd knots, okay? But in miles per hour, that was over 1,450 miles an hour. Coming into the parking place, and the crew chief is waving me in to park, and he goes like this, which means stop. And I stopped, and I'm looking at his face, and I can tell that he is PO'd about something. I mean, he's mad about something. Brought all the parts you sent me with back. I mean, that ought to be pretty good. I got out, and I found out why. His airplane had just come out of the paint shop, going 1,400 miles an hour, peeled every bit of paint off of the fuselage of that airplane. And actually, we had our squadron emblem on the front of it. It was a different squadron emblem because we got it from a different squadron, so it was going back to the paint shop. So
well,
that was how it feels.
People think you could just kind of, climb it in your super. No, the F4 couldn't do that at the time. F-16s could do that later on.
Absolutely.
But you really had to do this thing and get up there and then finally get through the Mach and get to Mach 2.
When I went through F4 training, we spent 6 months going through RTU. I had 2 missions out of all of them that were BFM missions, which are called Basic Fighter Maneuver missions. The rest of it was all sitting in class watching how you should do things. We had a horrible record in Vietnam fighting MiGs, very bad. And to embarrass the Air Force even further, the Navy had a better record than we had. They've changed things a lot. The Air Force today is not the Air Force that I loved, but it just wasn't learning to fight air-to-air. Now, fortunately, that wasn't my mission. I didn't do air-to-air. My mission, my specialty was laser-guided bombs, which we have one here in the museum. I had a chance at one MiG just before we leave bad guy country and going over to hit the tanker, making a turn. I look down, and there's a MiG turning right in behind me. So I turn, and I turn back at him, and as soon as I do, he goes this way and dives away from us. He was painted white. And the MiG goes down, and I'm looking at my fuel, and I'm looking at the tanker. So I thought, I've had enough of this, and we go to the tanker. I've been kicking myself in the rear for years that I had one chance at a MiG and I didn't take it. We found out later in Vietnam that the MiG-17s had a routine where they would have a wagon wheel of MiG-17s circling low. They would have one suck you in, and as you followed him, he would go through that wagon wheel, and this always would be somebody at your 6 then. That probably was a good move on my part.
All right, so, one of the missions I want you to tell us a little bit about is when Operation Linebacker.
Okay, well, Linebacker, my truck comes down to pick me up, and I'm ready to get in the truck, and the guy says, hurry up and get in the truck, Major. He says, we got a briefing in 10 minutes. I said, what? He says, we're going to Hanoi. I said, what? And so I get in the truck, and we go up there, and we brief Linebacker 1. It's going to be that day. I hardly was out of my
your civilian clothes.
And by the way, you're going to lead the chaff flight in. We were going to drop what we call chaff bombs. So it'd be like tinfoil confetti in the air. It kind of hides from radar because it reflects very well into radar. It kind of hides the airplanes. Not entirely, but kind of.
Right.
So we're going to go in and we're going to drop a chaff bomb every 30 seconds from the initial point to Hanoi. And we had 2 flights of 4. And we're dropping our bombs. Somebody had developed a system that went in the right canopy bow of the F4 that would detect SAMs. And it was a little round scope, and it had a little red light under it. This light would strobe at where the SAM radar was tracking you. So if somebody was tracking you over here, you had a strobe over there. It was totally useless in Linebacker. There were SAMs everywhere, airborne, so the red light was on all the time, and there were strobes all the way around you because SAMs were tracking you all the time. So you had to visually identify them, which is the way you avoided them anyway. We had a maneuver we flew called Take It Down. You got the SAM above you pointed down so that the SAM would accelerate to close to Mach 3. You would watch it coming towards you. When you couldn't stand it anymore, you'd pull up right into the SAM. And as you pulled up into the SAM, the aircraft has got very large flight controls relative to the SAM missile. And so as you pull up, you can pull up pretty steeply. The SAM missile stalls as it's trying to go and goes off under you. That's how we have avoided them. And you would hear all the time somebody yelling, take it down, you know. Backseater yells, said, MiGs, MiGs. I said, where? 12 o'clock. I said, those are SAMs, I've got them. And so I had 2 SAMs going up straight in front of us. My number 4 guy, high test 4, saved my life. He says, high test lead, take it down, take it down. The left rear view mirror, when I looked at it, was full of SAM. The SAM was so close to us, I could see the canards, the guiding fins on the sand moving to guide towards us. I'll never forget that SAM. And there wasn't any take it down to it, it was there. And so I just pulled up and it went off right here. The frag pattern on a SAM was built to shoot up at B-52s. So the frag pattern went down and away from me, so we didn't get any damage. However, it went off so close that it rolled the airplane. We had 14 SAMs fired at us in 15 minutes. Only 1 airplane got damaged.
Great story.
If we were in the time machine, you could go back and do it all over again, you would, wouldn't you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Only thing I would do different, I would start out younger. You know, I've found in my life there's something to be said for perseverance. I've had many people coming through here, young men, young ladies, that want to go to the airlines or want to go to the Air Force. And they're just starting. And they see this long thing, and I tell them, persevere, man. You've just got to keep knocking on the door till somebody lets you in.
Well, great job, Phil.
Thanks for joining us. Thank you very much.
you.
Well, that will do it, folks. We hope you enjoyed episode 35 of Behind the Wings podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, then subscribe and just leave us a comment. We really appreciate it. We'll see you next time right here on Behind the Wings.